Welcome to The Snap. Sorry it's been a long time. Shouldn't have left you. Without a dope beat to step to.
Yes. The
sorry.
hip-hop is in the building.
I am Ruby Red.
I am Zen Master.
And I apologize for the absence. I had to take care of some personal things and
which is code for none of y'all damn
right.
business.
And same with Rose Bloom. We're navigating some interesting territory. There's a lot of bullshit going on right now.
Yeah. So, what you want to talk about today? What are we snapping them out of today?
All right. So, I don't know how anybody has avoided it, but there's a little bit of chaos going on right now in our country, dealing with families that are being separated at the border, and detention centers for children in America. That's right. Detention centers for children that are being taken from their parents.
All right, so, well, immigration has been a thing in America for basically as long as I can remember. So, but this whole separation of family thing seems new. So.
It kind of is. There have been, extenuating circumstances. Ordinarily, you do not want to separate children from their families. You don't want to separate families, period. Unless there are extreme extenuating circumstances. And I am seeing that theory being floated as a justification for all of these. But currently there are 2,300 children that have been separated from their families at a point when they cross the border. And this aspect of it is new. Taking children away from their parents at the border is new. About 6 or 7 weeks ago, a policy was implemented. A zero tolerance policy was implemented.
You said how long ago? You say again?
I want to say 6 or 7 weeks ago.
Okay.
Weeks. Now, right.
Because Trump time moves very slow. So
yes.
It feels like months, but it's been weeks.
Yes. For any kind of perspective, we are recording this on a Sunday, about a week and a half after the North Korean summit. I want to say about 4 weeks ago, there was a story on Chris Hayes' show talking about that really brought it to the forefront that there were families being separated at the border and not having an opportunity to see each other again in any kind of short amount of time. And
a lot of it is due to this zero tolerance policy.
Right.
So what was the policy they had before it was zero tolerance?
Okay, so there have been, people crossing the border in ways that don't line up with what we have with current laws on the books for years, for decades. And, immigration policy has been one of those policies that becomes part of every single campaign platform, Democratic or Republican platform, for going back decades. What has changed, there have been a few different confusing things in the media that I've seen. Some people are saying that this is because of a law from 1997. It's not. Or some are saying that this is because of a law under the Obama administration. It is not. So there are laws, and then the policy deals with how you implement those laws. Zero tolerance policy would be one where, so crossing the border illegally on your first attempt is classified as a misdemeanor. Something that you would normally get a fine, like a parking ticket, is a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
You go to court, you pay your fine, it's on your record, but you don't go to jail for misdemeanors. You don't get arrested for misdemeanors.
Yeah, and also them coming over, it will be done on a case-by-case basis.
Right, they would. Yeah, the policy before was to judge that on a case-by-case basis. What changed was Jeff Sessions coming out and saying we are going to be implementing a zero tolerance policy. That means that if you try to cross our border illegally, we will prosecute you. And that means that you may be separated from your children. What that means is, instead of getting a fine and getting a court date and coming back and pleading their case or going before a judge,
Which is how it was done before.
Right. Is when they cross the border now, they are immediately detained, and they are really manipulating a law that says you cannot detain someone's child with them when they are arrested. So imagine you get a parking ticket, and the minute you discover it on your windshield, you are greeted with handcuffs and you are taken into jail. You don't just get to read the receipt and then, go to court or pay your fine. You see the parking ticket on your car and you are immediately detained. And if you have your child with you, sucks to be the child. They're going to put that child in baby jail, is what they're going to do.
Yeah, because, part of the problem comes from with them coming over, the only guardian they have is the parent that is just getting locked up, so they got to have somewhere to put the kids, and they've been putting the kids in these, what do they call them, youth retreat, but they got some kind of cute name for it, so it doesn't sound as bad, like youth retreat camp or some shit.
So they've got detainment centers, or they've got, I think the cute name you're looking for is the tender age shelters. There you go. Yeah, tender age shelters. Tender age shelters is, basically the tender age shelters are where they're putting the children that are coming that are infants. Some of these aren't even verbal. There's been reports of like a 9-month-old. Just if any of you have a 9-month-old, or remember your children being 9 months old, or you've ever interacted with anybody that is not yet 1 year old yet, I want you to think of all the capabilities that child has. And then I want you to imagine that kid is sitting in a playroom where no one is allowed to console them. They've been taken away from their parents. They're not having that explained to them. If they understand a language, it's not the language that's being spoken to them.
And a lot of the times it's like they're not even properly getting the information of the parents and the kids, so that way even if everything would be all right, it's going to be very difficult to get them reunited because nobody knows where their kids have gone. Mm-hmm.
And they just started, I think today or yesterday, it came out that they are implementing a reunification task force. The reason you would need a task force is to try and fix something that there was nothing in place to maintain. Like there was no, some of these parents, they don't know where their children are going. They don't know how to locate them after, they've had a chance to try and get in contact with them. There are no words for this, but this is happening in America. These are happening in detention centers that are privately run. There have been a few governors that have come forward that are pretty angry at the moment because they didn't even know that they had a detention center in their city. And they're trying to figure out why they don't know this.
So this was super top secret. So all them conspiracy theorists sound kind of, they don't seem so crazy at the moment.
Right, some of them. It's
half of y'all still sound crazy. I just want to throw that out.
But what I want to talk about today is how does a society get to this point, and how are there people defending this in any capacity? There have been a lot of people making a lot of Hitler comparisons, a lot of Nazi comparisons throughout, pretty much since 2015 when the president announced his campaign. He started his campaign by announcing that, talking about Mexico was not sending their best, that they were sending, they're bringing crime, they're bringing drugs, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. That was, right out the gate, those were some of the first words out of his mouth. But
that was before he got elected, right?
yeah, that was how he started his campaign. He said, I'm going to run for president because Mexico's not sending these people, or is not sending us their best. First off, countries don't send people to immigrate to other countries. That's not how that works. If somebody is emigrating or moving to another country, they have their reasons.
Last time I heard that happened, it was the 70s with Cuba, when they actually kicked all of them out.
So, understandably, the Hitler comparisons have gotten a lot louder in the last couple of weeks. And some people are kind of annoyed about that because they feel like they've just been hearing Hitler, 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 Nazis, Nazis, Nazis.
I mean, well, for just to not really play devil's advocate, but I do understand how we've been hearing a lot of leaders get compared to Hitler when people want to vilify him. But it's pretty much, it is important to note that Hitler wasn't the only Hitler.
Right.
So it's so it's not like a crazy thing that, somebody gets power and they abuse their power, fucking happens.
Right. And the reason Hitler comparisons get thrown around is because he was a pretty good example of what not to do.
Yeah.
Of what not to be and what to watch out for, because the Nazi propaganda machine was so effective that it is something that is worth making comparisons to when they're warranted. And you're right, Hitler's not the only Hitler. Hitler's not even the only Hitler of his time.
Yeah.
But the comparisons you could make, it's 2018, there are still leaders in this world that you can compare to Hitler, such as someone who sat down with the president just a week and a half ago, the leader of North Korea. They, run that country. It's probably one of the most brutal dictatorships in the entire world at the moment. But you can compare, you can rightly compare Kim Jong-un to Hitler. You can also rightly compare Assad, Bashar al-Assad in Syria. I would say is a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, what's my man's name in the Philippines?
Duterte.
Okay, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that.
A lot of people don't. But
that's why I threw you the softball, baby. There you go.
It is Duterte, and I get frustrated listening because I hear Duerte or Durte or anyway. It's Duterte.
We bring up those specific names because one of the things that's where this comparison is coming from is how they use propaganda to vilify a certain cast of people or citizens or whatever, and use that to use the vilification of those people to justify their bullshit, basically. And that's kind of what's happening here in America right now.
Duterte does it with drug dealers.
Yeah.
He makes the justification that these are drug dealers, these are animals, these are people that are not worthy of life because the things that they do are causing a lot of harm to other people. These are dictators that have been praised by our current president. However, while they can be compared to Hitler for their own things, there's another, there's another comparison that can be made, and the current comparison that's being made and the current thing that everyone is yelling about and other people are getting annoyed about is the idea that these the migrants that are crossing the border illegally are being put into camps. Okay, so first, you don't just out of nowhere be able to, you don't just start putting people into buildings in large groups in effectively cages. There was an anchor that said, that literally said these are basically like boarding schools or summer camps, while she has an image of these people laying on like cushions that are like this thin, and they're covered in these like foil looking blankets looking like baked potatoes with their little Mylar blankets, and they're behind fences because they are fences. They are being kept in cages on a cement floor, and this picture is right over her shoulder, and she's saying these are basically boarding schools. Right. I would encourage anybody right now to go to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, their website, and I stumbled across it, the section that I'm going to direct you to, by Googling the phrase anti-Semitic propaganda or Nazi propaganda. But you can go to ushmm.org, and one section that pops up is defining the enemy. And I think it is a really important part of their website.
Because that's another thing that draws a lot of comparisons to, like, you'll read that and see a lot of the comparisons between how Trump has been vilifying the Mexican immigrants and how Hitler was vilifying the Jewish community. Trump had the what was he doing? Voice. So, well, voice, like I said, you guys can figure out what the E stands for, and voice is basically was Trump coming up with a list of immigrants that committed crimes, and illegal immigrants that committed crimes in America, and like was using that list as like propaganda, like, hey, see, this is why we shouldn't allow them in here. But at the same time, you can go back to World War II, while Hitler was running for president, I think.
He wasn't. He actually took over by way of coup. He was elected to office, but then there was the Kristallnacht, and that there was the fire.
But I know he ran a campaign.
Yeah, he
did. During his campaigns, when they had the what was the newsletter?
So it was the criminal. You can Google the phrase "the criminal Jew," and there was a weekly or monthly magazine, basically, that would put out all kinds of crimes that were allegedly committed by their Jewish citizens. So that
was used to vilify.
That was used to justify the treatment that they then imposed on their Jewish citizens. That was, the first thing that you do in order to the first step towards genocide is dehumanizing. So what you're going to do is in order to dehumanize a human, you first need to separate them into us versus them. And once you have them on us versus them, then you start defining the them as whatever it is. The voice is the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. This was something that I heard him talk about setting up in his very first State of the Union address, and I said something about it 2 seconds after he put it up, because it immediately put up huge sirens going off in my head, because I knew that was one of the first things that Hitler did. Was he had his list of criminal acts by Jewish citizens. So then you start associating crime with the Jewish people, or in this case, he wants you to associate the crime with immigration. And you can do this with any number of groups of people throughout American history, throughout history in the world. If you want to see how a group of people that fall under any category or label that is any kind of nefarious label, if you want to know how they got there, how that association came to be in your mind, it started with someone othering them from you, making them not part of your group, and then defining them by what they want you to see in that group, in this case, criminals. But this was, one of the first steps, and he did this right around the same time that he did the Muslim ban, another group of others, and people started saying, hey, this is what Hitler did, and other people were like, can you not do the Hitler comparisons already? We're only like a month into his administration. But the reason that it was an alarm bell at that time and the reason that people were screaming at it is because you don't reach massive atrocities and human rights violations overnight. They do not happen overnight, period. They happen over time. You have to numb the public to it. One of the ways that you can numb the public to it is just by having an onslaught of bullshit news every single day.
Which is part of the reason why Trump time goes so slow, because we're so used to any president normally has like some wild news happening like once every 6 months, but with this motherfucker it's something every goddamn day. So it's like,
if it's just one.
yeah.
I've had people ask, why do I care? Anytime I hear news stories, I try to relate it back to my own life and try to put myself in the position of whoever is the topic of that news story. And I will do that for people that I don't like as well, just to see, to see the other perspective, because I realize that naturally people are going to us, them. That's just part of human nature. But it's something you can override a lot of times if you just stop and think about this. What I really want to get to is I feel like I'm seeing an appropriate level of outrage from people of a lot of different corners of my friends groups. And I'm seeing a couple here and there. I'm not really close to those people, but I'm interested in seeing that viewpoint just so I know what's out there, I don't know if anybody else does that, but I do. I'm weird.
I had to stop doing that. Well, we already had that conversation on a different episode.
But one of the counter arguments that I'm seeing is that these children are being taken away from their parents because what they are doing is a crime and what they are doing is illegal. And my first thought is, if that is your first reaction, why is that your first reaction? And
well, it's also part of the
have you never?
Oh yeah, like basically you've never done anything illegal.
You've never done anything remotely illegal? Like, have you ever been pulled over for a speeding ticket? Could you imagine your child being taken out of your car and never being able to see your child for speeding? I mean.
Yeah, then because I understand that they say that ignorance of the law does not exclude you from it or something. But I mean, like if the laws are changing that damn fast, and it was.
And they're not even changing laws. They're changing the way they implement them.
Yeah.
Because they can't change the laws. But they're also doing this even if you are a supporter of this policy, can I at least appeal to your sense of organization in the fact that they are not telling people in other countries that this is now the policy. There are people that have, so I want to do a thought experiment real quick. I want you to imagine, what would it take for you to pack up just the bare necessities of what you need and trek thousands of miles across several countries, working in secret, working in cash, trying to make your way to a country that would take you in, where you would feel safe, or at least safer than what you are leaving? What conditions would it take for you to decide to bring your young child with you on a journey like that?
So y'all safer on that journey than wherever the hell you at.
Yeah. And do you think that if you came across a desert, you are going to be following on some mystical Wi-Fi signal? Or, do you have your laptop with you? Do you have some kind of internet access? Do you go and watch TVs?
So no contact with the outside world to know that the plan you put in place according to the way the laws were being implemented had been changed. So when you got there, you're expecting to be able to do X, Y, Z and go about your citizenship that way, and instead it's totally changed around, and now it's a fucking clusterfuck when you get there.
I just want to appeal to any kind of sense of organization in your life. If you're going to change something, if the laws are going to change around you and you're in support of those laws, can I at least appeal to your sense that they need to have some kind of coordinated effort to let the people that have some way of letting these people know that that's what they're going to be coming up against, to have some way of communicating with these other countries, to have some way of communicating to at least, if you're going to be proud of this, be loud and proud about it. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of it. Don't do this and then have
Don't leave out all the horrific parts of it, and then just, you know what I'm saying, bring up just one little small point.
There was the unaccompanied minors crisis a few years ago, and one of the things that wound up happening with that was because there was such an outcry about letting these unaccompanied minors come to the country. There were a lot of people that were up in arms about, you know, these illegal foreign kids invading our country and coming across the southern border with no parents or anything like that, and we were taking them in because they were the children, think of the children, and mocking that, you know, kind of think of the children appeal, which, okay, what's the purpose of that? A. B, they put in a policy of, you know, if your undocumented child comes across this border illegally, we will be sending them back to the countries that they are coming from. You know that we're not going to take you as an adult. Please don't send your children.
And that was sent around.
That was sent to all of the countries where these kids were coming from, so that could be very clearly communicated to the citizens of that country.
Yeah, so it's like with the fact that now that not only are they changing everything and it's not being communicated, it kind of to the point feels like it's entrapment. Like it doesn't even feel like point.
That's a good word.
Yeah, so it doesn't even feel like the point is to keep the border safe or keep the country safe. It seems like entrapment. Like it seems like there's something else going on, to where it's more about these hateful acts than it is about anything else.
Yeah, well, they actually, a few weeks ago, they said this is supposed to be a deterrent, but you can't have a deterrent if they don't know that that's what they're going to be coming up against.
Yeah.
They don't know that there's a deterrent there. That's just cruel. So then they had to take that back, and they were like, no, this isn't a deterrent. We're just trying to make sure that they follow the laws. The same exact person within days of each other. Just anyway.
So the UN also has problems with the way that all this has been happening.
Yeah. You know, one of the things they discuss in the UN, and part of the UN's policy, is that you should not be forcibly separating children from their parents unless there is a damn good reason for it. But they have decided that the children's rights on this are, you know, it is a violation of human rights to take these children from their parents and separate them from their parents with no clue how to get them back, with no clue how to communicate with them, with no clear path on how to reunite with them. 2,300 children. 2,300. That is a lot of children. And if the UN is decrying the U.S., the light of the world, the home of the Statue of Liberty that says, bring me your tired, huddled masses yearning to be free. If the UN is decrying us and scolding us, that is a recipe for the UN to take action. We don't want the UN taking action on us violating human rights. Any countries that are on a list of violating human rights, we will now forever be associated with that in 2018. Another argument that I've seen, or at least a common refrain that I've seen, has
of justification of the bullshit.
has been, oh, well, we did this at this point in time. What about, Japanese internment camps?
That shit was wrong too, goddammit.
And the president apologized, like publicly apologized for it. I believe Truman apologized publicly.
You're supposed to learn from the past and not really repeat it, especially if it's some bullshit.
And you're not supposed to use it as a justification for doing it again.
It was, like I said, it wasn't cool then and it ain't cool now.
Right. There was a literal war fought about the one that's most prevalent about separating babies from their parents. There was a literal war that ripped the country apart. And, the Japanese internment camps happened during another war. So what are we inviting? That's not a road I want to trek down, personally, in any case. I know what it's like to have a family member taken under circumstances that I don't have any control over. But the situation was still a situation. It still comes from an immense amount of privilege. We knew where the family member was. We knew who the family member was with. We had means of communicating with that family member. And it took a year and a half of just tons of legal bullshit and workarounds to get to be reunited with that family member, who was an infant, who was not even 6 months old when they were taken from our family.
Yeah, so even if you were to reverse all of the immigration laws that's going on right now, how long is it going to take for people that have no idea where the damn infant is?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They didn't.
If you take away all the levels of privilege that my family had,
like, y'all still be looking for the baby.
As of this recording, as of 3:30 on Sunday the 24th, they still had not yet been able to produce any footage or photographs of the infants or the little girls. So far, the only detainment, the insides of the only, the photos that have been released by the government have been the people in the cages on those really thin mattresses with the Mylar blankets. Those are the pictures that they find
good enough
suitable
for the public.
And
see,
those
that brings me to, like, well, one of the things that I want to talk about with this whole thing is the effects that that's going to have on the children. So he keeps calling them like, okay, well, they're criminals coming in and this and that and all that, which we all know that's not entirely true. And but I'm like, if you're separating these kids from their families and you're having them sleeping on concrete and all this stuff and all this traumatic shit is being happening to these kids, what effect is that having on the kids themselves so when they grow up? Like,
and
who are we creating? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
I have in my mind somewhere that a lot of your personality is formed by the age of 5. A lot of what happens to you, a lot of how your character develops starts being cemented by age 5. We don't have any images of the tender age shelters. We don't have any images from there. And you can say, okay, well, they're not allowed to release public photos of babies. Fine, but they're blurring out the faces in some of these other ones. Why can't they blur out the faces of, the toddlers and infants that, they're so sure they're doing the right thing that they're moving these kids in the middle of the night under the cover of darkness to move them to, like, one thing I read is there's probably a facility within 2 hours of you. Anywhere in this country, there is probably a facility housing some of these kids within 1 to 2 hours of you. But we don't have any images of the ones that are holding the infants that are not being cared for, that we are inflicting trauma on after. We are continuing trauma and separating them after they've reached the end of riding in the backs of trucks. You know, I've read stories over the years where they've found trucks with the immigrants in the back, and some of them have died from heat exhaustion because they're traveling in the back of the trucks. They are risking this, the level of trauma that they have experienced on their way to this country. And then we are taking them from their one stable element of their life and inflicting even more trauma. Like you said, who are we creating? This whole episode, you know, I feel very strongly this is a very important message to get out. You know, my grandfather left a job, a reporting job. He was a reporter, and he covered a lot of the civil rights movement. He covered like sit-ins and you know, a lot of the bus boycotts and anything that was happening in his city and elsewhere. But while he was reporting on the sit-ins, the city commission would call into the place where he was working and you know, scream and yell at his higher ups and tell him that, you know, he was making the city making the city look bad. You know, which sounds a lot to me like someone in authority saying, hey, you're fake news. And my grandfather's response to that was, I thought the city was making themselves look bad. I was just reporting on it. If you are making these Hitler comparisons in your head and other people are trying to shout you down, ignore that. We are moving into a whole nother level that really needs to be addressed. One way that you can help, you can go to amnesty.org. That is the Amnesty International website. They have sections on there that define what is a migrant, what is a refugee, what is someone seeking asylum, because we haven't even gotten into how to seek asylum and how they're manipulating that. There's you know, there's a lot of good information on there, what you can do to help. That's the Amnesty International website. Another way you can help is you can donate to RAICES. Google RAICES. There's been a GoFundMe campaign that is linked to their website, and it's a 501(c)(3). It's a charity. It is completely legit. You can Google RAICES. It will either link you to that GoFundMe or to their website directly. But what they do is they provide legal help for these families that are separated, the ones that are waiting for their cases and that are still not being united. They are also helping people that have been deported back to their countries without their children, because yes, that is also happening. It is not too big of a comparison to start comparing this with camps. That's what these are. These are prison camps for children. And anyway, another place you can go if you want to understand how the Nazi propaganda worked to reach an ultimate point of, you know, throwing people in ovens. You can go to ushmm.org. That is the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And there's a whole section on there called Defining the Enemy. I think that is a very important place to go. If you don't see parallels in there, wake up, please. There are way too many. Snap out of it. Yes. And the last thing is there is going to be a march in Washington on June 30th. There's a hashtag Families Belong Together. I really don't care if you disagree with me on this subject or not. This is a point in history that you need to be involved. You need to do something. You need to say something. You need to call your representatives, figure out where they stand on this. You need to figure out, try and figure out where one of these centers is near you. Try and find protests. Try and find any information that you can. If you need more information, there's those places that I referred you to. You can just Google the ongoing immigration crisis, and a lot of links will pop up. But this is something you need to be informed about, because this is being done under your name. If you are a citizen in this country, this is being done in your name. And I don't want it being done in mine.
All right.
Peace out.